What is good, guys? Welcome back to another video on 8 Count. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the UFC 275 pay-per-view card, which went down on Saturday night. So many different storylines coming out from this one. It was a roller coaster ride from start to finish on what ended up being an amazing card. Before we get into the video, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like, it would mean an awful lot to me. Subscribing to the channel so you didn't miss any of the upcoming content. And in the comment section down below, let me know your thoughts on the main event, which went down on Saturday night. And let's get straight into it, guys. The main card was amazing, but the prelims, which I could talk about all day, some really, really fun fights which went down on Saturday night. We are only going to talk about the main card in this video, though, because I honestly thought I'd be talking about the prelims because I didn't expect too much from the main card, but it ended up being one of those crazy ones. And I think in the UFC, it is one of those things where you look at a card and sometimes you're a bit underwhelmed, and all of a sudden it becomes one of the best cards of the year without a doubt. But for me, I was actually really disappointed because of the fight which fell off of the card. I thought it was going to be one of the better fights of the card. But in came Jake Matthews to replace it against Andre Fialho. I guess we should start off with the Jack Della Maddalena fight, which was a crazy fight. I think he obviously looked like the cleaner of the two on the feet to start off with. But, with the wrestling ability of Ameev, it was only a matter of time before he was kind of put in trouble. Jack Della Maddalena was able to somehow withstand this sort of attack from Ameev, where Ameev went for some sort of an anaconda choke. And, for Jack Della Maddalena, it was a really tough sort of task trying to get out of that choke. You see him working multiple different escapes to try and get his way out of it. I think when you saw him roll, you knew it was in really tight. And for me, I was kind of worried for him because for a guy who was getting such a great pop from the crowd, it looked like he was on the edge of defeat. But somehow he's able to just fucking withstand it and, not panic. And I think that was one of the main things, which when you look at the fight, it was kind of like, he was able to put himself in that position where he was able to stay calm. And, it was a great escape from him. After that, he was able to get up onto the feet and, he showed his sort of finishing ability, really. And, you thought Ameev maybe would have struggled after that, putting so much into the choke. But he came forward, he did a great job of mixing it up, not just, being a headhunter. And I think body shots in MMA are definitely one of the more underrated aspects of the sport. I think if, fighters see this, I think they should really start to focus on working the body a hell of a lot more in fights. I think over the past few years, the leg kick has become one of the main weapons in MMA, and it's a great weapon. But, you're still missing 50% of the torso, not targeting the body. And, the way Jack worked it in this fight was amazing, and fair credit to him. I think moving forward they should try and match him up against another sort of high rated sort of talent, I think, before making a step into the top 15 of the welterweight division, in which he looks like he could definitely be a star in a division, obviously coming from the Oceanic region, representing Australia. I think this guy's got a huge star power, just seems like a really genuine guy, and I can't wait to see him fight in the future. We move on to Andre Fialho against Jake Matthews, which was one of those fights where I couldn't really believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing from Jake Matthews. I've been watching the sport for the majority of my life, and, Jake Matthews has been in the UFC so long, I can't really remember him not being in the UFC. I think he came in at 19 years old, which is just crazy in the first place, and to still be around is a credit to how he has adapted over the years. I think coming into the fight, I did think that Jake Matthews would probably look to use his wrestling and attack, as he is a very decent grappler. I think when you look at some of his previous fights, he's only struggled against some of the better grapplers in the sport, and I think it was just a complete change. I thought Fialho would be the much better of the two on the feet. I didn't know if he'd have a speed advantage, but I thought he would have the more, technical ability and be able to break down Matthews. But I really couldn't believe it. I thought Matthews did a great job of, not only countering, but, really using all sort of aspects of the striking. Obviously, he was using the leg kicks really well, in my opinion, because he was able to keep Fialho at range at times and also kind of get the respect of Fialho. I think the counters were really important, but I think the way he was able to create angles for those counters really made a big difference. I think the composure was something which was insane, because I think for someone who I haven't really seen as a really good striker in the UFC, he showed that sort of composure and calmness in the fight where, you know, Fialho would look to try and, you know, pick up the pressure, but he was able to maintain the fight at the pace he wanted it to be fought at. I thought for me it was a really coming of age performance for Jake Matthews, and for me in the future, I think the sky's the limit, really. I mean, he's still only 27, which is, you know, still really young in UFC. I think in MMA, people don't really reach their sort of prime years, especially in the welterweight division, until they're around, you know, somewhere around in the 30s. And, you know, I think your prime is probably going to be over around 35. Especially at welterweight. I do think this is a division where you can go slightly older compared to some of the lower weight divisions. But yeah, for me, like I said, he was able to keep this sort of performance going, and, you know, at times it looked like Fialho was kind of able to tempt him into a brawl, but he was getting the better of the exchanges there as well. It did look like he got knocked down towards the end of the round, but from what Mike Bisping said, it was just a kind of like a trip. You know, he kind of tripped over his own foot. So, you know, saying that, he clearly took round one. Round two, for me, you know, I thought he was a more aggressive fighter, and I thought that he kind of, you know, could smell blood, and he knew that he was the better striker in this matchup. I think he went forward on the front foot, and he was kind of hunting him down. And the combination he finished him off with, you know, just kind of slept Fialho, was crazy. I'm super excited now to see what Jake Matthews can do in the future, because for me, the way he performed, if he can do that against some higher rated opposition, there's no doubt that this guy could be a contender one day still. You know, for a guy who came in with so much hype at such a young age, you know, he kind of had fallen off the wheel. And, you know, for me, I definitely didn't think of him as a future contender, but now with this sort of performance, is without any doubt that he could definitely get to that sort of a level. We move on to one of the craziest fights of the card, Zhang Weili finishing Joanna Jędrzejczyk. For me, I just thought that Weili, you know, she looked the more athletic, I think you could say, of the two. I think Joanna, you know, when they were at length and at distance, I thought her striking in some of the exchanges were really good, and, you know, I thought she didn't look too overwhelmed. I think, you know, Weili was looking to counter the leg kicks with that sort of big right hand, and definitely earned the respect of Joanna straight away in this matchup. I think for Joanna, though, you know, and both of these girls, they really kind of looked to start off where the last fight sort of finished, and, you know, they weren't obviously scared of each other. I think the way Joanna was kind of throwing her sort of wild right hook, you know, it kind of showed the vicious intent in this fight, which kind of finished in the fifth round of the first fight. I thought when Weili was able to kind of close the distance, she was just different levels to Joanna in the strength category, and she really bullied her. We know Joanna Jędrzejczyk has some of the best takedown defense in the 115-pound sort of, I guess you could say, era. I mean, you know, some of the fighters she's fought, and she's always been able to, even if she gets taken down, find a way back to her feet. And it was kind of no different in this fight. I think, you know, Weili was at times able to change the angle and some of the takedowns and get Joanna to the floor. But I thought Joanna did a great job of not only kind of scrambling, but, you know, making a way to get back to her feet, because, you know, at times she was having to accept a beating from Weili, because Weili was having such, you know, good posture and raining down some really, you know, hard strikes. And if Joanna wasn't to move, she would have been in big trouble, because the fight was going to be stopped. For me, I thought Joanna did a great job getting back to her feet, but you could tell that Weili had some confidence after the first round. I think round two, you saw Joanna looking to kind of push the pace on the feet a bit more, I think, because I think she was kind of worried about going onto the back foot and allowing Weili to be able to, you know, dominate the range and kind of decide when she wanted to go in for a shot. I think, you know, it kind of led to the sort of finish of this fight, Joanna coming forward heavy. I think Weili missed a kick, but all of a sudden that spinning back fist which came round, and, you know, it was kind of on that sort of temple area, almost on the back of the head, and, it just shut Joanna down, and she face planted the floor, and it was one of the craziest finishes in the 115-pound era. The only one which comes to mind, which is on this sort of level, is the Jessica Andrade knockout of Karolina Kowalkiewicz, which was a while back. But this was crazy. In the aftermath of this fight, and what it means going forward, it is kind of really important. I think Joanna, now is kind of looking to retire, and I think fair play to her. I think she's been such a role model and such a pioneer for women's MMA, and especially in those lower weight classes. I think when she came into the game back in, I think it was 2014, I think she joined the UFC. It was something that was really kind of unseen. I think you've seen in like some of the heavier women's divisions, like 135 pounds, there was a lot of fighting outside of the UFC, especially in Strikeforce, and that's where kind of Ronda made her name. And I think it was, a decent standard, obviously nowhere compared to what it is now, but I think Joanna is part of that kind of push forward in women's MMA. I think you look at the 135-pound division, women's bantamweight division, when it kind of started off in the UFC, and the quality of fights were very different, and the striking levels were way under par to what they are now. I think Joanna came in and kind of showed people how violent women's MMA could be, and she had this style which, ultimately captured so many people, with not only the style of fighting coming forward and kind of massacring some of the girls in the 115-pound division. I think people look at her record and there's a lot of decisions, but you got to remember she only fought the very best in the division, and to hold the title for such a long time, only losing it to Rose, and everyone knows what talent she is. The first fight with Wei Li, where in my opinion she won, but obviously lost on the card, you got to think about her going up as well to fight Valentina Shevchenko in a matchup where she'd already lost twice in Muay Thai. Crazy sort of levels of challenging herself and only fighting the best competition that she possibly could. But the way she was able to capture people with her persona of this sort of woman who was so confident in her abilities, and she would go out there and kind of prove why she was so confident. And the Boogie Woman, just such a pioneer, as I said, not only for women's MMA, especially in the lower weight divisions, but also for women's MMA in Europe. The way she came in and kind of was able to, I'm sure there's a lot of girls who are training now in Europe and worldwide, I guess, who look at her and say that she's her role model, and what an amazing career. And sad to see it go down the way it did, but I think nothing but the best for her in her future. I hope she can kind of stay involved in her MMA somehow, because like I said, the great personality she has and the way she able is to capture people's imagination. For Wei Li, I think this was an amazing win. I do think the fact that Joanna coming in after such a long layoff would have had effects where I felt like Wei Li was the favourite because of that long layoff for Joanna, and we know what Wei Li's been up to, and you've seen her performances against the very best, and she's been very good, whereas Joanna has had that long layoff and we didn't know what she was kind of going to be. For me though, Wei Li, this was an amazing performance, which without a doubt means that she is getting the next title shot. I think the way Rose lost the bout was kind of pathetic in a way, and she'll look back on that performance with great regrets, I think. But this opens the door now for Weili Zhang to go back in there and fight Carla Esparza for the bout, in which I think she'll be a heavy favourite. I think her wrestling has come on so many leaps and bounds since working with Henry Cejudo, and I think that you look at her now and the sort of athleticism that she has. You've seen her workouts where she's absolutely crazy. This, for me, she's better than Carla Esparza everywhere. I think even in the wrestling, Carla's going to have an awful hard time going to try and get down Zhang Weili, because not only does she have that sort of skill in the wrestling department, but she's got that athleticism, which I don't think is kind of rivaled in women's MMA. But yeah, I cannot wait to see Weili hopefully claim her bout back. That takes us on though to the Valentina Shevchenko versus Taila Santos fight. Kind of a crazy fight for me. I think coming in, I thought that Shevchenko was really going to dominate the range with her striking and have the majority of the success, especially on the feet. But I thought for me that Talia Santos was going to have to kind of be on the front foot and kind of push a pace and, kind of have to crash into range with, Valentina Shevchenko to have a chance not only to make the fight dirty on the feet, but, have that ability to kind of get the takedown or maybe end up in some sort of wild scramble. And I don't think that really played out. I think what happened more in this fight was Valentina Shevchenko dominating the range, and I think at distance was definitely getting the better of the two throughout the majority of the fight, especially on the feet. But where I think Valentina kind of shot herself in the foot in this fight was she would control the distance, but she kind of rushed into some sort of attacks and she kind of crushed the range. And sometimes she would look for a takedown, but other times she wasn't. And she was just, the range was no longer there. And, Talia Santos was chest to chest. And sometimes she was able to get a takedown of her own where she'd be able to go into a clinch and kind of drive Valentina towards the fence and then look to get a takedown from there. And other times, Valentina would look for a takedown and, Santos would either be able to escape on the bottom and find her way into top position, or there'd be a scramble in which Santos was able to take the back. And, Santos was able to take the back 3 times in this fight against Valentina Shevchenko, in which is kind of like a statement in which I never thought I'd be saying. I thought she would probably be able to have success at certain times in the fight, but not like this. For me, this has put her leaps and bounds levels ahead, in my opinion, to what I did think she was. Obviously, she had the moment in the 3rd round where there was a clash of heads and it really hurt her, and it kind of, I guess it's some sort of break on the orbital bone or fracture, and the swelling was immense and she couldn't see out that right eye, and I did feel sorry for her. Overall in the fight, she was able to have multiple success getting to the back. You'd see her lock in that body triangle, but I think there is this thing in MMA now where the body triangle is kind of given the advantage to the defensive fighter. The fighter is looking to not get submitted. I think the body triangle is setting them in position, yes, but it's making the fight even with 2-on-2. It's 2 arms against 2 arms. I think whether where you see in high level jiu-jitsu where people take the back, they might lock in that body triangle, but they won't look to attack really with the body triangle. I think the body triangle is becoming more of a I guess you could say stally and like a stalling tactic, but I don't think it is. I think it's because people want to hold that position because it's such a dominant position. But I think in MMA, I look at the likes of someone like Fabrizio Verdum, who when he get the back, he isn't putting in the body triangle. He is using the hooks. He's bringing a leg up to attack an arm to make it, be able to go 2-on-1. And that's not what Santos did. I think the fact that she didn't go for that sort of 2-on-1 attack by using one of their legs to trap one of the arms of Valentina Shevchenko definitely give Shevchenko that sort of possibility to defend 2-on-2 and made it a lot easier for her. I think the success of Santos should have definitely been credited, but I think in this in this era anyway of scoring, it's just not going to get that value because there's no damage being created other than, I guess you could say, some of the cranks in which she was really driving that forearm into the face of Santos, whether that be on the jaw or kind of on the nose at times, which looked really nasty. But obviously the damage on the feet where Shevchenko would land blows and, they are counted as damaging blows, she is going to get that advantage. I think for the people who are really disappointed in that fight, and, are upset with the scoring and feel like it's a robbery, in certain ways, I think you're out of your mind just because of the way the fights are scored. And if you look at the way fights are scored, it was kind of clearly a Shevchenko fight, in my opinion. 3 rounds to 2 at a max, even a 4-1, in my opinion, isn't out of the realms of possibilities, especially if you give Shevchenko round 1, which is definitely a possibility if you look at the way the fight played out on the feet. But for me, I don't think your issue is with the judges who called this fight. I think your issue should be with MMA in general and the scoring criteria. And I think the scoring criteria has got to change. And I think the way that we score fights has got to change. I think the 10-9 must system is kind of barbaric nowadays, especially in MMA. I think, you see it as more of a boxing sort of scoring system. And, obviously coming over from the boxing side, I don't think it really kind of makes sense anymore, especially for MMA. And I think we have to move to a different sort of system, whether that be a score in a fight as a whole, like they used to back in Pride. I really wouldn't mind that sort of idea because I think I guess you could say Shevchenko maybe would have won the fight still, but I think it definitely make it a hell of a lot closer. I think, I'm not too sure what the solution is, but I think people who are, involved in MMA and have that sort of ability should definitely be looking for a way to change the sport. I think if you look at other sort of promotions who do different sort of things, when you look at one championship, the fight is kind of scored in a different way, especially to MMA, especially in like North and Central America. I think, you kind of look at the one product as well. And, this is a sort of area where one has a lot of success in that, like sort of Southeast Asia sort of places, places like Singapore. And, MMA if you're only watching UFC, you're missing out on a lot of talent from these sort of areas, because a lot of people do go to those sort of promotions. But like I said, I think the scoring's got to be changed, and I think the fight maybe could have played out different, but I think Shevchenko did a good job to hold on to a bout. I think it was definitely a much harder fight than she thought it was going to be. And I think this kind of has I guess, dimmed the light, but kind of brought this sort of unbeatable mentality that Shevchenko has, kind of brought it down a peg or two, because I think other fighters will be looking at that and seeing that they can have success, and she does have these sort of weaknesses in certain areas. For me, I think it's going to take someone still who is extremely good in multiple sort of facets to have a performance where they could possibly take the bout away. But I think if she stays if she stays in MMA long enough, that person's certainly going to be there. For me, I would actually like to see a fight between Weili and Shevchenko. I know Shevchenko kind of has a little bit of a size advantage, but I think if you look at them athletically, I think you can make a case that Weili is athletically superior to Valentina Shevchenko. I think she'd have certain successes, especially in some of the wrestling areas where she could use that sort of strength and explosiveness to maybe have success. But I think her main sort of success point would be that she wouldn't fight Valentina at range. I think she'd definitely crash in. I think she would cause problems, and I think it'd be a hell of a fight. But I think other contenders at the 125-pound division should be looking at the fight which Santos put on and really, think to themselves that they could do something similar, and shouldn't be looking at Valentina as maybe this boogie woman who is undefeatable, and maybe look at the weaknesses that she does have. This takes us on to the main event, which in my opinion is one of the craziest fights I've ever seen in MMA, let alone UFC history. For me, it was just crazy from start to finish. Going into the fight, I did pick Jiri Prochazka via second round TKO. And at that time, I thought that could have maybe happened. But for me, I didn't expect Glover Teixeira at 42 years of age to be able to have the sort of damage resistance, which he did, because he was hurt on multiple occasions in this fight, but was able to fight back. And for me, I don't think I've ever seen a fight with this many momentum swings, and it was kind of laughable at times because I didn't believe it was happening, because I was like, it's too crazy to even believe. If this was in a movie, it wouldn't make sense. Do you know what I mean? One of those ones. And for me, I was laughing at times. I was like, no way, sat here in my chair watching the fights go down, because you'd see Glover would have success, but you knew that something was going to happen, and the page would just flip and the tables would turn completely and Jiri would have success. It was like in the first round where Jiri would have success on the feet, but then Glover got the takedown. Glover would do a lot of damage, but then somehow Jiri got back up to his feet and then ended the round in the guard of Glover Teixeira, landing some blows, which if he had 30 seconds left, the fight could have been finished. I think both of these fighters made, some terrible mistakes in the fight where, you look at some of Prochazka's sort of jumping attacks in which he allowed Teixeira to close the distance and be able to get the takedown with relative ease from there. I think Glover at certain times, I think even at the end of the fight, jumping for that guillotine was just crazy, because he did have Jiri out on his feet at times. It was one of the crazy fights where no matter what they did, they kept making these sort of mistakes which allowed their opponent back into the fight. For me, it's crazy though. I think Jiri Prochazka is one of the craziest fighters I've ever seen. I've tried to think in my mind, who can I compare him to in some sort of combat sports scenario? And it's like, you think about Emmanuel Augustus, the drunken master in boxing, and I don't even think you can compare him to him, because it's just nuts. Because at least Augustus, despite being wacky and weird, he kind of had this style where you could see, well, yes, the way he's throwing these strikes is very weird and different, but it's still comparable to other fighters in boxing. But with Jiri, it's completely different, man. It's like he's got this style which he he learned MMA off Street Fighter or something like that, the game. It was just crazy for me. I felt like some of the ways he holds his hands and conceals his hand and then throws it, and the way he was moving, one of the most weird fighters I've ever seen. And the fact that he's a champion with this style, just one of the craziest stories of all time. For me, he's another fighter that he will definitely be beaten at a stage. I don't know who by and when, but the damage he takes, it's not, something you can do and be champion for a long time. Like I said, it was crazy impressive that Glover was able to resist some of the damage that he did and still end up in this fight. Obviously, both of them with massive cuts. You look at the cut of Glover Teixeira's nose, it was nasty. The cut, which was opened up by an elbow on the ground from Glover Teixeira on Yuri Prochazka's, sort of eyebrow area, was one of those ones which I thought was kind of bad enough to kind of almost stop the fight because of how deep it was. But yeah, like I said, just one of the craziest fights I've ever seen. And for Glover to kind of almost blow it towards the end, jumping that guillotine, he was up on one of the scorecards at least, and I think if he didn't jump the guillotine, maybe he would have had a little bit more success in the fight. I think he would definitely taken that round 5, unless there was another momentum swing and, he would have walked away at 42, defending his UFC light heavyweight championship and potentially retiring. After the defeat, he did say he still loves to fight and he's going to continue. He's asked for a rematch online, which I don't think is the worst shout. I think a lot of people would like to see Jan Blachowicz get the shot, maybe just because of the fact he beat Rakic. But for me, I think that there's a case for a rematch here because, in my opinion, like I said, it's one of the wackiest and one of the great fights in MMA history for sure. This will 100% go in the UFC Hall of Fame. I think there's a case for the rematch to be had off those bases and the way that the fight swung so many different times. And, I think a lot of people would like to see it again. But I think Jan Blachowicz, the way he lost against Glover was disappointing. And the way he won against Rakic, despite having, a lot of success at certain points in the fight, it was an injury which kind of stopped the fight. And therefore, I think people may, justify Glover getting a rematch before the fight goes down. But for Yuri, a super impressive win once again. 3 fights in the UFC. He's been on an absolute roll. You look at the finishes he's had over now. What's his name? No time. Volkan Ostovic and Volkan Ozdemir, sorry. And, Dominic Reyes, the elbow finish, which left, Reyes out cold. Crazy. And now to get a submission victory over Glover Teixeira, which is something I never thought I'd ever say. I thought a knockout finish, TKO finish, 100% possible. But the submission win, I never thought I'd be saying in a million years. I would love to see the rematch happen. For me, at times, I did feel bad watching the fight. I felt like Glover did look old at times. At other times, he looked great. But, when he was getting beaten up on the feet by Yuri, I felt like just stop it because it just didn't look right. And I did feel bad for him. But, congratulations to both on putting it on one of the craziest performances in MMA history. And, I don't think I've ever seen a fight with that many swings of momentum in my life. And, in all, it was a crazy fight card. And like I said, I think a lot of the talent from this sort of area, especially in the Asian sort of region, there's so many sort of promotions now that I feel like a lot of the talent is kind of stolen away to, the likes of Rising and ONE FC. And for me, I think it was nice to have a card which was kind of in this area and it was able to highlight, especially on the prelims, some of their talent from this sort of area. Like I said, I do think a lot of MMA fans do miss out on seeing a lot of talent from this region because a lot of it, like I said, is kind of steered away in different promotions. And I think the UFC is still trying to have that sort of success in Asia, to the point where they have even more Asian sort of fighters. And I do think it's only a matter of time before we see an Asian explosion in MMA and in the UFC, where the UFC is able to pull more fighters from the sort of region. And it could be similar to the Dagestani invasion with Khabib and his cousins and his brethren and all that. But yeah, like I said, guys, it was a crazy card. I really enjoyed it. I guess I predicted the top 3 fights right, so I'll take that. But yeah, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment down below, let me know what you thought of the main event. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. I got a video this week where I'm going to be discussing the upcoming fight card, UFC Fight Night, Kattar versus Emmett, which is going down in Austin, Texas this weekend. And for fight night, it's a fucking crazy card, so make sure you join me. I guess sometime this week, where I'll be doing my picks and predictions for the fights. Until next time, guys, make sure to take care of yourselves, and peace.